today, the shortest avenue to wealth, which is unearned, is kungatuka. You must leave when the audience wants you to stay. Because that is how you pass over the baton to the next generation, and you watch them as they grow. You become a supervisor or a guide or a mentor. But when you stay for too long, history has the habit of showing you out in disgrace. I remember when we invited the late Professor Ali Mazrui in 2001, he gave a paper which I remember to date. He said, if Kenyan politics and African politics is by extension ethnic prone, can we have constitutions that are ethnic proof? And he was saying that in the context of how we devolved. We then suggested that if we want to devolve, let's have 14 units. And we looked at the economic viability of those units. There are those who said 18. And we took that view by looking at South Africa, whose economy is 4 times larger than our own. It has 9 provinces. The economy of the province of Gauteng only is bigger than the entire economy of Kenya. They have a population, Gauteng, of 16 million. We have a population of about 55 million. And we, of course, had the Bomas draft, which was interfered with by Nkilifi. And we had the famous or infamous Wako draft, which was then rejected at the referendum. And that is how, after the 2007-2008, we ended up with the constitution in Naivasha. And I remember when they met in Naivasha, there were debates, what should we do? Then somebody, I'm told, said, but we had 42 districts, 47 districts, let us make them the devolution units. And as I speak to you now, I have no doubt in my mind that we should reduce the counties. We should merge them. And the reason is very simple. None of those devolved units are sustainable. If you look at each one of them, they are technically insolvent, all of them. And secondly, they have ethnicized our country. Not only ethnicization, but clanization. It's also in clans now. And when we were talking about devolution, we also said we don't want counties that are ethnically pure. For example, if you go to the western part of Kenya, we said, or we suggested that what was then known as Luo Nyanza should comprise Kisii, should comprise Kuria, should comprise what is the Kipsigis land, and should comprise Bunyala or Busia, so that there is no ethnic purity in any one county. Today, within the counties, even the ethnicities have been divided, but that the much more important issue is the economic issue. And this is why all these counties, when they meet, you hear the coastal part, because they are beginning to realize that coast county makes sense. They are beginning to realize that the lake region makes sense, that the northern region makes sense, that southern Rift Valley makes sense. But the tragedy now is that people have got so used to the power that springs out of these counties. The politicians have persuaded the electorate that these are things that are owned by tribes, so that voices such as mine are likely to be drowned in the sea of political convenience and ethnicity. But one day, and I hope sooner rather than later, there'll come a generation that will recognize that we've got to do what is right, and that if you want an omelette, you must break the egg.
It's been years and years of putting the Constitution together, implementing it, hitting many, many roadblocks along the way. When you look at the kind of constitutional challenges that we're facing, or challenges to the Constitution, I would say, what How does that make you feel as someone who saw this process from the very beginning, saw drafts, discarded, thrown away, interference from political powers, all the way to having and enacting a new constitution and trying to implement it? How does that make you feel?
It is painful. Painful because it was a long process. And painful because when I see the political players across the political divide, they were there. I sat with them at the Bomas of Kenya, most of them for 111 days. Many of them don't believe in the Constitution. Many of them. And that is why you've seen attempts at amending the Constitution. When you see initiatives such as the BBI, those are amendments designed to defeat the constitutional order. When you see proposals such as NADCO, those are attempts to defeat the constitution. Many of your typical Kenyan politician sees the constitution as a tool that is to be used and manipulated for them to gain short-term political interests. They don't care about this country. They don't. They don't care about the people. They care about political power.
Right.
And that is why, even if you look at the implementation of the Constitution, there are things that we ought to have implemented, but they are not getting implemented. Instead, we are trying to amend this, to introduce this or that office, saying we want Prime Minister, we want Chief Cabinet Secretary, we want
Opposition
CAS. We want a position leader, which is completely out of context with the constitutional philosophy that we had. When you have a presidential system, you have minority and majority leader, not opposition leaders. But the reason is the typical Kenyan politician is myopic, and it pains me to use this word. Myopic to mean short term. They are looking to the next election. They don't care what happens. And that is why even you newspapers, when you report, you say, when somebody is appointed in the cabinet, you say lucrative. And I've always wondered, lucrative, they're only entitled to a salary.
Right.
But lucrative means that they have the opportunity to use and misuse the offices. And that is why in Kenya, to seek political office is a life and death issue where throats are cut and people are maimed. And remember that relative to our GDP, the Kenyan MP is the best paid, the second best paid in the world.
Yeah.
After Nigeria. And that is why people look for it. They kill for it. They maim for it. I remember as a young lawyer, when there was a commission appointed at that time, led by Akilano Muladi Akiwumi, and I appeared before it, they were suggesting that the emoluments of parliamentarians be increased. And my memorandum is still there. I said, don't. Immediately you make politics lucrative, you'll attract the wrong reasons. Let politics be sacrificial, so that those who want to get into politics want to serve. Today, the shortest avenue to wealth, which is unearned, is politics.
It's politics. You've talked about short-term leadership. I'm wondering if there was ever a time when we had visionary, long-term leadership. Just your observation of looking at our country. Was there a point when you thought?
Yes, there was.
There was. When was that?
When I look with the courtesy of history and I look at the first generation leaders, particularly before 1966, when we are coming up with sessional paper number 10 of 1965 on African socialism, when we are going through the process of Kenyanization and Africanization, and you see the arguments of those days, you see the arguments of individuals like Jean-Marie Seroney, people like Thomas Joseph Mboya at that time, you could see men and women who, despite their failings, were looking at the nation beyond their time. To his credit, at that time in 1960s, even Oginga Odinga was in that particular league. Even Jomo Kenyatta in those early days. Of course, we started losing it in 1900, immediately actually in 1964, when KANU merges with KADU, we begin to lose it. We begin short-termism. We begin to have these marriages of convenience. There was such a time. And there were individuals in the Kenyan political arena such as Josiah Mwangi Kariuki, J.M. Kariuki, Martin Shikuku. You listen to them and you are convinced that they love their nation. But then we lost it. We lost it in the 1980s, 1988, it went south, right. 92, and we have never recovered from it. And the tragedy is, with the current crop of politicians across the political divide, the tragedy is that they have trained another young crop, so that if you have faith in the emerging politicians, now, permit me a little latitude. When I read the Christian Bible and I see that the Israelites were taken out of Egypt and that they all who came out of Egypt died in the desert, I now know why. They had left Egypt, but Egypt was still very much in them. I am telling you that the current crop of politicians, whichever mask they wear, they are not interested in this country. That is why you see them moving from one political formation to the other. I was counting all the leading, so-called leading politicians. None of them has been in less than 6 political formations. 6 political formations, migrating from one to the other, saying one thing with one side of the mouth, promising heaven and delivering hell.
And this is just in the last 25 years.
Just in the last 25 years. So that when I hear people saying, we have political parties, there is not a single political party in Kenya, none, except to the extent that they are registered under an act of parliament that calls formations political parties. A political party is anchored upon ideology, which tells you in agriculture, this is what we believe in. In education, this is what we believe in health, this is what we believe in. None of these formations tells you that. They are just vehicles that people use, and they use them for purposes of getting into office. So that what we have are formations that are led by leaders of personal cultism. They are cults in many ways, led by tribal kingpins, whom I call low-voltage warlords. Why are they low voltage? Because they don't bear arms. But they are just ethnic warlords.
Prof, I hate to interrupt because there's so much I've picked from what you're saying, and I'm trying to get as much out of it before we move on to the next thing. You spoke about so many things that should have been implemented constitutionally that haven't. What are the biggest disservices that we have done to our 2010 constitution?
A number of things. We have, as much as we can, and I say this very guardedly, strangled devolution so that it doesn't work to its full splendor. If you look at our chapter 6 of the Constitution, which tells you what our leaders should have, and I want you to scout Parliament and scout with the men and women that we elect, do they qualify and satisfy the requirements of integrity? Look at our financial systems. When we created financial systems in our Constitution, one of the things is that we would not have this thing called pending bills. We said that we were going to manage our finances properly. We are not. Look at the question of appointment into public office. We still see nepotism and ineptitude and political patronage as the big things. And if you look at our education system, we said that we would give education its pride of place as a fundamental human right. Look at our human rights situation. We are making the biggest blunders in that area. Look at our foreign affairs. Every diplomatic faux pas. In the last 6 months, we have annoyed Democratic Republic of Congo, we have annoyed Sudan, we have annoyed Sahrawi, we have annoyed South Sudan, we are annoying everybody. Look at our own declaration that we would be part of the East African community and would provide leadership. Look at the bilateral and unilateral decision that we are making, entering with Europe, with the United States of America, to the detriment of the East African community. And if you look at even issues of gender, we have been unable to deal with the question of gender. Look at our electoral systems on matters as mundane as constituting our electoral body. Look at our appointment system, which is one of the most expensive appointment systems in the world. If you want to appoint one person, you first of all put together an appointment panel to sit for several days to earn allowances, and once they have recommended, you even reject that appointee. So if you look at the Constitution and what we promised ourselves, we have been doing everything, we to mean the political class, to undermine that Constitution and to do the very same things. When I saw things, and to my credit, even I have to, if I have to say so myself, there is not a single attempt at constitutional amendment in respect of which I have not written a memorandum. Whether it was the BBI, whether it was NADCO, whether it's the attempt at amending the Constitution to entrench the CDF, which is a slush fund for members of parliament, I put my memoranda. And the reason is, I've seen this before as a student of constitutional law, when the Independence Constitution was amended nearly 27 times between 1963 and 1969 and had to be reissued, reorganized and reissued again. And we are in a hole. When you are in a hole as a country, you stop digging. But unfortunately, we have not stopped.
We are digging ourselves out of the hole.
We are digging ourselves
deeper into
Without excuse, we are digging ourselves out of it.
Right, but it's actually going deeper in.
So the tragedy is that the political class do not take time to reflect. And permit me, look at the forums at which we articulate critical issues at funerals. When I was growing up, a funeral was a solemn occasion at which you only talked about solemn issues relating to the dead. That is where political parties articulate national issues. At weddings, in churches. The mosques are a little bit good in that they have shut out this kind of nonsense, and the temples. But the Christian churches, excepting, of course, the Catholic Church and the SD and Presbyterian, and possibly some parts of the Anglican Church. But the rest of them have lent themselves to be used by the political class so that the society is captured, as it were, by men and women who have no interest of the country and the nation. I think there was also another critical moment in the 1990s, what is normally referred to as the Second Liberation. During that period, and I was in the Council of the Law Society, I remember, with people like Willie Mutunga, Charles Nyachai, Gibson Kamau Kuria, Paul Muite, Martha Karua, and that was the time when we were seeing the real transition. I think the spirit again at that time was right. The rhetoric was right. But after the removal of Section 2A and the reintroduction of political parties, you see that personal interests came into play. And that is how the original Ford was then split very quickly into Ford Kenya, Ford Asili, and Ford People, and the rest is history. Daniel Moi continued to govern this country with what was fundamentally a minority vote until he left office. But let us now come to the question of electoral bodies, and it links up to what the situation was at that time, because we used to have a director of elections who would be named by the president. Then in the new constitutional dispensation, we said we want an independent electoral body, hence the IEBC, and we said we don't want the individual serving in IEBC to be appointed by the president in the manner that he used to do prior to the coming into force of 2010 election. So that if you look at the process of putting together the IEBC, it is an expensive method. You, first of all, put together a panel that invites applications, shortlists, and ultimately interviews. And once they have interviewed, they send names to the president, who then appoints or recommends to Parliament, which then vets. And once they are vetted, the names are sent back to the president for formal appointment. On paper, you cannot fault the system. You can say that the entire system is rigged. You can say many things. But it is in the nature of human beings to say things about many things. There is not an appointment system that is perfect. And the problem in Kenya and the problem within the political class is mistrust.
Yeah.
That is the problem. There is nothing wrong. That is why we complain. If whatever set of individuals you bring, people will complain about them, because in truth, individuals want to have appointed into the IEBC those whom they think they can manipulate. And if they don't think they can manipulate them, then they accuse them of all manner of ills. And my view is, let us go through the process and have these individuals subjected to scrutiny in Parliament. The problem is that we also have a Parliament that is subject to scrutiny. So you never know whether they are animated by the desire to look for good people, or they are animated by ethnicity and political convenience. And it is tragic in our country. The very fact that we doubt these processes, the very fact that we even print ballot papers outside of the country, is an indictment of who we are. And once again, and I say this ad nauseum, we have had a crop of politicians. They were in politics when I was at the university. I'm now past official retirement age. They are still telling me that they are the ones who bear the vision of the nation. Until this crop of politicians are consigned to the Museum of History alongside the spinning wheel, this country will not make the strides that it needs to make economically, politically, or otherwise. Because they are the ones who remind us we are Luos. They are the ones who remind us we are Luyas, Mulembe Nation. They are the ones who remind us we are from the mountain. They are the ones who remind us we are Somalis. They are the ones who remind us we are Mijikenda. How can you build a nation in the 21st century where the primordial instincts of ethnicity are the things that govern decision making? And that is how you look at IEBC. You look at the composition of IEBC, there are only 6 of them. Somebody say, but there is no Borana. There is no Kamba. Now, do we do an IEBC where every tribe is represented? I want all of you to read Koigi Wawamwere's book, Toward Genocide in Kenya, The Curse of Negative Ethnicity. And Koigi, to his credit, says effectively what I'm saying, that our problem in questioning every activity, including composition of public institutions, is informed by our ethnic inclination, as reminded always by our ethnic kingpins.
How do we save ourselves from that? Okay,
Right.
sorry, I had to ask a question. Can I?
Yes.
How do we save ourselves from that? Just going with this IEBC, on the show, when the selection panel was about to start its work, we interviewed the chair of the selection panel. And when they started, we kept saying that it's upon all of us as Kenyans to actually watch what they're doing. That to hold them accountable, we had to look at the names that they're publishing as shortlisted candidates. We look at them, we look at how they're performing at the interviews, and let's come up with our own way of saying we can sense that this process is sober. That has not happened. Now we sit back here and we're listening to the kingpins, as you call them, when they say this is right, this is wrong, and we are likely to be swayed by what the politicians are going to say. How do we fix this of ourselves ahead of the next election?
You know, Latif, when I hear somebody says, because somebody knows somebody, if you are good to be appointed into the IEBC or any public body, you must have built a profile over time. You must have met people. You must have met individuals in high places. So the mere fact that I know the president, or that the president knows me, or that somebody is a cousin, is not a basis for disqualification. I want to hear that the individual who has been nominated is an individual who has an irredeemable criminal past, or is an irredeemable corrupt individual. The fact that he's known to this and that, to me, is not an issue. My view is these individuals should be subjected to the process that is prescribed in the Constitution, and once they take the oath of office, they should now recognize that they have a higher duty and that they are not beholden to the appointing authority.
But you and I know, PLO, that the water has already been muddied. They will go through a vetting by Parliament, but questions will remain. And as we head closer and closer to 2027, those questions will keep coming back.
Of course.
Louder.
That, you know, this person was picked by Ruto, and there was Raila involved, and so. He's from Turkana. The person who sits in Turkana as the deputy chief of staff in the presidency is a Turkana former governor. Those issues will come up.
Latif, do we want the UN to manage our elections? Because what Kenyans are here, Kenyans saying, that we have lost faith in ourselves completely. That we now want our elections to be managed either by the AU or the East African Community or the UN. That is effectively what we are saying, that we have lost faith in anybody who is Kenyan, and we want the international community to conduct elections for us. If that is what we want, then let us say it, because whichever set of individuals you appoint, there will be an argument one way or the other. So let us make the decision. You politicians who are there, let us today, if we Kenyans are saying, particularly you, the political class, you are saying that we have no faith in ourselves, let us ask the UN to conduct elections on behalf of Kenyans so that we don't complain. Because at this rate, there'll be nobody capable of being appointed. And I don't want to see any good Kenyan who has the capacity to serve being denied an opportunity because he's the relative of a person who knows the president, who knows somebody. That cannot be the criteria for shutting people out of public office.
So is the alternative to just agitate for change? To Latif's point, it's how do we save ourselves? And you're saying we can't afford to say, this is just a gone case, we're going to leave people to figure this out. You're saying that it's up to us to push for what we need?
Absolutely. And you are doing it here. You don't take for granted and what is being done through various media. We are awakening the spirit of the nation, that we cannot allow the politician who themselves are players to determine who the referee is going to be. And in any event, if you look at our constitution so very keenly, you will discover that the result of any election is determined at the polling station. This thing that we do every 5 years at the Bomas of Kenya has no constitutional basis. If we were to have that done, and you look at other countries which have done it very well in Africa, Botswana. Look at Namibia.
How do they do it?
Because they have trust. You'll say they are smaller nations, almost mono-ethnic, but that is not an argument. It means that the spirit of integrity is upheld. The politicians are beholden to the legal system. In Kenya, unfortunately, we have bred a crop of politicians in this country who actually believe they are above the law. They believe you cannot arrest them, you cannot question them, because if you dare, their entire communities will come and make the country ungovernable. It is unfortunate that we have allowed ourselves to create such a crop of politicians who think, as I've said before, larger than life, almost as large as death.
Do you think then last year may have marked a bit of a political turning point with regards to the Reject Finance Bill protests? Do you think that was a moment? I mean, I think we've talked about it to no end in terms of it shifted. We were collectively pushing back on these rising taxes during the Gen Z-led protests. Do you think, based on what we're saying, there was a political turning point, but maybe right now it's been marred by internal conflict? And how do we guide our way through that?
Our young people conquered fear. And when you conquer fear, that is the beginning of liberation. And let me tell you, the country has never been the same again and will never be the same again. There may be a lull, but the seed is planted, and you can see that the young people have migrated from the streets, but they are in social media, speaking largely responsibly. And you can see that even individuals and elements in government and in the opposition, they are running scared. They may appear to be very confident, but they are running scared because they know that there is a crop of young Kenyans who have unmasked and undressed them at once. The only thing that must now happen is that these young people and other persons of goodwill who are not so very young must organize themselves and ensure that in the run-up to the election, which is 2 years away on the 10th day of August 2027, holding all factors constant, that they keep up the ante. And these individuals who are speakers at funerals and weddings and in churches will soon realize that ideas that change the nations are not articulated at such fora. I'm not afraid. I'm guardedly optimistic.
Guardedly optimistic. I think that's my stance too, and I feel very validated to hear it coming from you. But there's a quagmire, which is the how has been a big problem. And in the absence of the formality of a constitution, when it's a movement that seems to have one common goal but doesn't know how to get there, the how becomes a problem. Any ideas on the how?
Good war generals don't announce where they are going to attack and how, but I will say it because I say that if we have young people who are eligible to vote, take the vote. Take the vote as they have never taken before. And in addition to take the vote, they begin to get organized. Those who are saying that they support the youth and are announcing their presidential candidature left, right, and center, stop it. Let us organize, let us make sure that you are in one political formation and talk about the nation. Let me tell you, the ballot may shock this country. I believe that is the avenue because I believe that we owe it to ourselves as Kenyans to only speak about democratic, and I use the word democratic guardedly. We use the instruments provided by the law to bring about change because we have a country to protect. We have a country whose peace we must never sacrifice for short-term political interests. The young people, count your numbers. It has been done before, and it can't be done. And it can't be done through organization. It can't be done by saying what is necessary and not saying certain things. It can't be done through subterranean to mean doing things quietly. It can't be done by speaking to hearts and minds of Kenyans who want change. And why do they want change? Because they see that the current crop of politicians are not midwifing processes that change their economic circumstances, that change their very being. And my appeal to Kenyans of goodwill, whether young or old, this is the time to ask, do we have the nation that we want as it is now? Because our country is not at ease. You may say all manner of things, but our country is not at ease. You know, when I listened to our minister for the time being in charge of the treasury, explaining how the economy is doing well.
For the time being.
No, they're for the time being. How the economy is doing well, then I know the economy is not doing well. When the economy is doing well, it speaks for itself. You go to Gikomba and you see the economy. You go to Kibera, you see. You go to Emurua Dikir and you see the economy. You see the economy in every sector, in every pocket, in every handbag. It speaks. When you have to give an interview of 30 minutes to explain to us how well the economy is performing, then you are telling me the economy is not performing.
It's a macro, it's stabilization of the macro.
Right.
And then we shall go to the micro.
But it starts with trust. My biggest thing, linking to what Mariam has said, which is the how, is we just don't trust anymore. Because I'm sure in the next hour we'll try and talk about the finance bill, we'll talk about all these things. But at the bottom of it, my concern about moving towards 2027 is we just don't trust each other anymore, even those who might be trying to shift the movement in the right direction. So how do we go back to that element of trust? Because the trust was broken, but we need to rebuild trust.
Are we the first country to have found ourselves in such a situation? No, we are not. This is a very young country, slightly over 60 years. We have some of the first generation of politicians who are here at independence still with us. So trust is something that takes years and is intergenerational. And because of its intergenerational nature, we may be frustrated. But that notwithstanding, the voices of reason must not be silent, even if they cannot be heard in their purest tones. Look at the conversation that we have. Today, if somebody came into Kenya, you'd think we have elections next week. The newspaper headlines, the commentaries, the rhetoric from the politicians. It is because many of us, particularly in the political class, are not thinking about Kenya 100 years from today. People are talking about elections which are 2 years away. Some are even talking about those who will be president in 2032 and those who will be president in 2037. And people are recoiling into their ethnic cocoons. That is where they are beginning to feel a lot more comfortable. But what were the young people telling us? That we have a nation to build. That we are defining. They said that they were tribeless, to mean that their reasoning transcends ethnic articulation. They were saying that they are leaderless. They were not saying that they have no leaders. They were saying that each one of them can make a contribution to the process of leadership. And if that conversation continues, the trust appears to be there because of the political class. We have no more than 4,000 active politicians. They are the ones whose rhetoric get repeated in the headlines of the newspaper on a daily basis. They are the ones whom you give the first slots in your news, in all radio stations and all television stations. So they have inundated us, and the media has inundated us with their funeral orations to the exclusion of the younger people. But they are in the minority. If you are to give prominence to the young people who are speaking sense in your newspapers, and the newspapers were to take a solemn vow, we are not going to print nonsense from funerals for the next 6 months, they'll change rhetoric. And I look forward to the newspapers saying that none of these individuals will be covered for 1 month, and we are only covering things that talk about unifying Kenyan. You try it out and see what happens. If you doubt about your newspapers being bought, the young people will buy them when they begin to see they talk about agriculture, they are talking about education, they are talking about artificial intelligence, they are talking about employment opportunities, they are talking about invention and innovation. If that were to happen, then these individuals, once you deny them the oxygen of publicity, then reason returns. We do that. And to me, because Kenya is ours, we don't want Kenya to fail. We want Kenya to succeed. We want Kenya to be good. We want Kenya to be the nation that it ought to be. And that is why we must continue raising our voices in the hope that those who ought to listen will listen and will not poo-poo the thing that we are saying.
That's important. I wanted to go, because you've talked about the cost, right? And you're right, like having somebody to go all the way. I want to come back to our economy, and maybe I'm asking a very obvious question, but what fundamentally ails Kenya's economy? Is it public debt? Is it policy misstep? Is it endemic corruption? Is it global pressure? Is it all of them? What fundamentally ails our economy?
I'm not an expert in economy, but I'm a curious citizen. And it's a combination of all those. It's a combination of all those because at the macro level, what are the fundamentals that we are not doing right or getting right? Look at our tax regime, our taxation regime, it is punitive, so that if I was an investor in this country, the cost of producing an item per unit, look at our electricity, which is one of the most expensive in this region. Look at our taxes that we levy for those who are employers. Look at the excise duties. A combination of taxes is therefore creating a toxic environment for your investors. Look at critical sectors of the economy. Look at agriculture, for example. Agricultural inputs. Look at our tourism sector. We are losing out. I don't think we'll get more than 2 million visitors, and those are not even high-spending visitors to Kenya in the year that will end in 2025. Look at the production manufacturing sector. What is happening there? So if you look at the totality of our policy position, it is unfriendly, with the consequence that people are now preferring to go to Rwanda, go to Uganda, and go to Tanzania.
Right.
And if you look at our debt portfolio, what are we borrowing to do? We are today saying we are not borrowing from the IMF, we are borrowing from the World Bank. These are the same thing. You may technically the same thing. I'm not borrowing from Joroge, I'm borrowing from Onyango.
From his cousin.
But you are borrowing regardless. And if you look at all these things, you see that the net effect that we are also running a very expensive government. That is wastage, embezzlement, and simply a top-heavy government.
Right.
And I want you, if you may, look at your typical government, these devolved units. Their own revenue, I know one whose own revenue is not more than 400 million Kenya shilling, but they spend 2 billion.
That's their budget.
The economy of consumption without production.
Right.
And that, I think, is what is ailing our economy to the detriment of the macro and micro. The fundamentals are just strong, and we don't use our expertise as well as we should in that regard. We are hurt. We are not heartless. But we must always remember that the dead cannot be your enemy. If you had an enemy during their lifetime, they are your enemy. When they die, they are not your enemy. And we have a duty to condole. We condole with those who are alive, because the dead know not what is happening. But one can also understand why people appear to be heartless. That these individuals, when they are alive, they are so heartless themselves. They don't appear to care about the population, and the population wish them dead, which is tragic. I hope that we will regain our spirit of compassion as a nation and not celebrate people's tragedy. When your enemy is down, you hold their hand and help them up. That is the spirit. That is what distinguishes man from beast.
Smallest, I've asked if you'd consider running.
People don't remember that in the year 2007, I was actually asked by somebody who was in a very senior position in an institution where I used to deliver lectures, and they told me, run. And I told them, my understanding of the Kenyan electorate is that they are not interested in individuals like me who believe that they are warriors for ideas. They'll vote on the basis of who gives them money and on the basis of their ethnic affiliation. After my experience in Kamukunji, I've written 2 books, A Call for Hygiene in Kenyan Politics and Sanitizing Kenyan Politics. It doesn't mean that we must not participate in the political process. There is also the misconception in Kenya that in order to change your country, you must be in active politics. Right. Not all of us can be. But the electorate in Kenya is part of the problem. They are co-authors of their own misfortune. Tanzania, across the border, are friends of mine who are born in Mwanza, amongst the Sukuma people. They run and are elected in Mbeya, amongst their Wanyakyusa. Can I, to the person who asked the question, if my ideas are right, can I come to Meru and run? on the basis of ideas to deliver on agriculture, to deliver on education, you'll say, have our women stopped giving birth?
Wow.
That we may get a foreigner. So it is our duty, and that is one of the things that some of us have been doing, to try and tell Kenyans that we must be wedded to ideas rather than to ethnic and clan affiliation. Look at the formations, just to answer the question whether I would or would not. Look at the formations that are now emerging. They are ethnic. Forget about the political parties. It is about Mount Kenya. It is about Mulembe Nation. It is about Luo. It is about Kamba. It is about the Rift Valley. It is about the pastoralists.
Kisii, Nyanza.
Kisii is saying now we have our own, and everybody is saying they have their own. You cannot run a nation that wants to be a good member of East African community, a good member of the African Union, on primordial, pre-industrial instincts. Would I? Yes, I would. Is the time ripe? No, it is not. Do we have a duty to make the time right? Yes, we are. And we have. You know, the truth is this. There is no perfect system, but I know that we have what we call pro bono or free services from the Law Society of Kenya. I know that Kituo cha Sheria does that. I know that FIDA Kenya does that for women. I know in my own law practice, 10% of my practice is done without charging fees. And I know other lawyers who do this. So it is not true that lawyers are always asking for fees. I know very many individuals who, in their own right, do offer pro bono services. But I know that there is a problem with the administration of justice in this country. The higher one up in the political ladder, the more difficult it is for them to be punished by the law, whether it's in civil law or criminal law. And these are some of the things that we are talking about. I recently saw the documentary by the BBC, which has made the government very angry. In other jurisdictions, those officers who are mentioned there would have been dealt with firmly and immediately in accordance with the law. Nobody would be coming up and saying, but the government side was not heard. You know, so that we have a problem. We have a problem with our judiciary. We have a problem with our legal system. And this is work in progress that we must talk about. And once again, to the credit of many people, I think I'm one of the few people who wrote to the Honorable the Chief Justice about this. And to her credit, she has convened 2 meetings to address this very issue. So the duty of a citizen is to be engaged. To be engaged by way of petitioning authority at all times. And I do this, and I've been doing this since 1984. I remember only recently I wrote to the director of NTSA about the condition, the driving in our roads. Lawlessness has now become normalized. Unfortunately, many of these individuals in public offices, when receive letters such as those, I think they just crush them and say nonsense. He thinks we live in utopia. Let him go and live in his own world. But we must continue to say so, because if we don't, what will we bequeath to our children and children's children? All these nations that you see that are successful, they were people, they were individuals who are constantly engaging and complaining. And during their time, you think that nothing is happening, but this is what builds up. And remember, Latif, you asked, after the events of the Gen Zs, there is a lull, or there appears to be a lull, but there is no lull. The fact that we constantly refer to them tells you that there is something that cannot be ignored. And if it cannot be ignored, the question is, how then do we organize the nation? Because all these things that we are talking about is to benefit Kenya. What we want is a Kenya that works, a Kenya that functions, a Kenya that provides opportunities, a Kenya where people are not judged by the content, by their ethnic extraction, but by the content of character, not judged by their gender, but their ability to perform. A Kenya where we are sensitive to people who have problems, a Kenya that is compassionate. All these, this is the end game. If you are to be asked, what is the end game? A functioning, prosperous Kenya.
This must have been the end game at independence, when we had a new crop of leaders coming in and the independence leaders, those independence leaders, PLO, have left the stage, most of them, from national leadership. And they left the younger ones, your age mates and below, who are now the ones who've been in leadership for the last 20, 30 years, right? Those that were agitating and pushing in the 80s, going into the 90s for a new political dispensation, the second liberation. The second liberation champions are the ones in leadership now. And there's going to be another new generation that comes in, at least 2032, definitely. There's going to be a new generation. Do you feel that the current generation has actually done what it was preaching it would do? When you are agitating and pushing for change, for new constitution, for the end to, one single state, to a better Kenya, do you think this generation of yours has delivered?
It started from the first generation. From 1964, even that generation forgot what their mandate was. And that is why you see, today if you look at Kenya, some of the richest individuals were from that crop or their families, senior civil servants. They themselves thought that the country owed them. And when they had conducted themselves in an improper manner and we agitated against them and removed them through what is normally referred to as the second liberation, those who are in that particular movement and are in the political class also believe the country owes them. And constantly you hear people saying, so-and-so suffered. It's called the martyr complex. That because so-and-so suffered, therefore he is entitled. You don't. Your country owes you nothing. You owe your country something. And when you say you suffered and you're alive, remember that some died. They actually lost their lives. So until we liberate ourselves from this idea that your country owes you, we are always going to make the mistake. Sometimes I refer to Tanzania ad nauseum. Because I had opportunity to work under Mwalimu Nyerere. And I saw a person who loved the country. When he died, he had only 2 houses, one in Butiama, in his rural home, and one in Msasani. 2, after being in power for 24 years. Ask your local MCA how many houses they have after being in office for 5 years. Ask your typical member of parliament how many houses and how many dollars they have in their account. We think that public office is for purposes of primitive accumulation. So as long as we have that spirit, look at Nairobi today. I was telling somebody yesterday that if Nairobi were to be governed by resident associations, within 2 years, Nairobi would be shining because residents associations would do it for free. Nobody would ask for a salary. And that is true of everywhere. So our governance structure must change. Our attitude towards public office must change. Otherwise, we'll always have people who want to get into public office because, as I said a little earlier, is the shortest path to accumulation of wealth without the least sweat.